Hi, everybody. It's episode 26 of season 2. Yes, I know, it's unbelievable. Gary is still with me. Yes, he is. Don't ask any questions. It's just the way it is. But wonderful news. We have Paul Bessant with us today. Now, Paul is, what can I say? He's a globetrotter, and I'm sure he'll mention that. I hope he does when we talk about it in a couple of minutes when he tells us who he is. And he's the globetrotter for retail risk. And what they do is work out how to keep profits, people, and assets safe through a variety of mechanisms. And what they do is they advise us on how we do that best. And I have to say, having been to a couple of their conferences, it's an event not to be missed. Really, really interesting, really engaging. The speakers that they have on are top quality. My only complaint is I never win a prize, but I shall let Paul explain that to you later. Sadly, Paul, before we move on to you, obviously most interesting person here, I have to contractually oblige to ask Gary what he's done, and his role in the industry. Gary, please, enlighten us.
Thank you, Ian. You always introduce me so well with that amazing introduction. Well, perhaps we should get you up on stage and just introduce me everywhere. That might be the modern art thing. Anyway, before I'll start waffling about that, I'm Gary Twining-Wright. I've been in the security industry for 38 years. And for the people out there who don't know this, it's Ian's birthday today. So happy birthday, Ian Fox. Is that magical age of 77.
I look great, though. Yes, all right. Cheers for that, Gary. You can get your own back once in a blue moon. Now then, and now on to Paul. Please tell the world, not that they don't know who you are, but please tell the world what it is that you do.
Well, firstly, thank you for the invite. Nice to see you again, Ian. Gary, I kind of feel that Ian probably needs to just follow you around in the real world and just introduce you in Sainsbury's as you walk in, and maybe even to your own family. I mean, that was quite the introduction, wasn't it? It was so exciting. I feel that you perhaps need that in your life. Yeah, I don't know what do I do. It's always been about retail. So right from the early days, stacking shelves, quite frankly, for the co-op. And like many people, that then sort of went through and progressed. So I did a graduate intake program without being a graduate. Another story there for another time. With Homebase when it was owned by Sainsbury's. Fortunately, nobody's ever found any pictures of me in green dungarees, a brown lumberjack shirt, and a brown tie. But I can assure you, I did wear that for a couple of years. Went through a variety of retailers, store management onto store openings, then joined a small German discount retailer called Aldi, which nobody had heard of when I was there. I think we opened 100 stores in the 2 years that I was there. And then through various random meetings, ended up working for a couple of trade associations, even managed to work for the European Commission for 2 years. That in itself is a chapter in my book. 60% of my budget was spent on travel, hospitality, and translation, and 40% of my 5 million euros each year, and this is a long time ago, actually went on doing work. But anyway, there you go. Like you say, another story. And then, Retail Knowledge is the company. Retail Risk is the brand that most people know. It's been around since 2002. And it came about, its first ever event was at Chelsea Football Club, long before Russian ownership and various ownerships now. They were poor in those days and they wanted business. And so they rented us the West Stand in Chelsea Football Club around, I think it was April 2002 for our first ever event. Not many people turned up, but more people turned up than the other people trying to run events at the time. And the nice people at BT, British Telecom, said, oh, there might be something there. So they then agreed to sponsor 5 more events. That provided the funding for the first offices in Covent Garden, which was a masterstroke because everybody wanted to come and see a company based in Covent Garden. There was email, but there wasn't Teams and Zoom in the same way. Everything was face to face. So that meant that people came and saw us, and the event sort of started off from there, all in London. And we facilitate, broker, advise, I don't know, we take in and repurpose information on fraud, risk, loss prevention. I think 85% of the UK's top 250 retailers regularly come to our events each year, and we now operate on 5 continents. So we get to see trends, and there are trends, as diverse as Johannesburg is from West London. There are things going on in the different markets that make it worthwhile. So, and I have the privilege of going to all of our events, being on stage, making the introductions, hosting some amazing directors' dinners, as we call them, which are private events. All of our stuff excludes press and TV, which allows for open discussions. Yeah, very fortunate. Sorry I didn't get to you in person for your birthday, Ian, but we had Retail Risk Melbourne in Australia last year. That one's been running for 8-9 years now. Fantastic.
You could have took
event.
us. You could have took me. I'd have accepted a ticket. We'd have come, wouldn't we? Go.
But I've been there.
But as you alluded to it, at the Retail Risk events, we have, we have the start of the day. We put all of the delegates into a big hat, and we draw names out. And one of the prizes is an all expenses paid trip for Retail Risk Cape Town, Auckland, Retail Risk Sydney or Melbourne. You've got to have your name pulled out of the 300, 400, 500 delegates that we have registered, and then B, you've got to be in the room. And that's just to encourage people to get there on time. And we've given away some empty bottles of Prime. We've even given away some nice dinners in London, West End tickets, hospitality to Premier League football matches, but nobody has ever won the prize. So the finance director is very happy, but other than that, we'd be delighted to give that trip away, and then somebody can come and experience us in another part of the world.
But Paul, before we go on, I don't know, Guy. Because I worked for who did I work for? Oh gosh, Texas Home Care at one point as a manager, etc. So, and I also did some consultancy work, IT consultancy work for Argos at their head office for their security reports. But how do you, Gary and I were talking, and beforehand, the difference between retail risk security knowledge now, 2002, I go back to 1979 when I joined Tesco's originally on their Scheme 30 program. There was a completely different way of dealing with, shop theft at that time.
Yeah, I mean, when I started as well, it got no more sophisticated than, a store detective. And I remember, the store detective where I started, bless him, he used to go from store to store on public transport because he didn't have a car. So not the most efficient use. He then arrived and spent most of the time in the staff room catching up with people that went on. And if you were lucky, you perhaps got a mirror at the far corner of the store. And there was no real awareness of internal theft. And interestingly, I look back, I was taught how to, this is another chat, keep a cash flow in the safe. So it was, various stores that I worked for, and then with this little cash float that you had in the safe, you used to negotiate with the 16 and 17-year-olds to come and do extra hours and talk about the hourly rate. So if I'd only got £20 in the pot, and maybe we were paying £3-4 an hour, but I'd know it was a Thursday night, and so they'd want to be out on the Friday, you could get more hours out of them than if it was a Monday or a Tuesday.
Oh,
And the area
exploitation.
manager would come in and look in the safe, and every single store in the group, and this is more than one retail, this generally, it was an old Oxo or an old Bisto tin that had been there for decades, had cash poking out the top of it. And so everybody knew it went on. When it came to stock taking, and area managers used to check each other's figures, it was completely common to add on a pallet of something or other if you thought you were gonna. I mean, it's just horrendous. We were taught how to have an unfortunate freezer failure if you, because then you could claim everything back. And this just went on. So it's incredible to think that, you know, there was any profit, whereas now, and I think that's why that slow realization that actually internal was probably as big an issue as external, but nobody internally thought that they were anything other than a model employee.
I went and worked at one of the first jobs I did. I worked for Asda. I went down there, and the girls and they used to come in there, and all they would wear was their uniform. Yeah, that'd be it. Yeah, and that would be it. When they went, they were literally had gone into the back room, and then they would have pants, bras, you know, wrap towels, anything that they wanted. They would go out looking about 10 stone heavier, you know, after they walked out, literally like the Michelin girls. You know, you'd say, yeah, can you come back here? And yeah, oh, I don't know how that happened. What do you mean you don't know how that happened? And we used to see it, used to that really. The one that I worked at the time was Park Royal in London. And I remember that because the manager, David Niven, went on to run Topshop. And he was just like absolutely amazing. And what he did, because we lost £750,000. So bear in mind, this is like 1985, so a lot of money. And he actually got Heinz, I think, to bring in Pantechnic after Pantechnic of Heinz baked beans. And they all got lined up, all these trucks lined down the road, and the staff were shown them. This is how much money we've lost. This is what it looks like over, you know, a 3-month stock taking period. It's just amazing. But we also used to get by. Gary, I just want to, you know, because Gary, his work obviously did a lot of stuff. You gave people the opportunity to make life affirming decisions, didn't you? In terms of whether or not they wanted to pay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. That's a little bit unfair. No, I mean, going back to the old days, it was a very simple way: either pay it back or go outside. That's how simple that was. Life changing decisions. Most people would end up taking stuff back. It was very, very simple on the internal side of that.
But you mentioned that, Gary, but it reminds me that, you know, take it back inside or whatever. But, you know, the whole sort of, you know, there's a big issue, and it has escalated to scary points, but around violence against staff. But I remember the first time having a barrage of tuna and salmon thrown at me, the tins, as I tried to reclaim. I can't remember what it was that was being taken out by a travelling gang, and it's sort of all bouncing off me. And I think I had a couple of stitches in, and they thought I'd broken a forearm, but it was fine, and all this kind of stuff. And the area manager sat me down and went, "Congratulations, there you go. You've earned your stripes now." No suggestion of anything other than it was just, you know, laughing it off, and it was normal. But, you know, the impact on that. And I remember, you know, we did manage to apprehend one of them because the description the police recognized, and they got them for some other stuff. And then a week later on finishing a late shift, and of course you used to lock the store up on your own.
Yeah.
All 4 tyres on the car had a blade put in them, and it was flat. And you stood outside a store in a sort of car park, no suggestion of leaving the store with another person. And then that escalated. About a month later, that particular store got a phone call about 3 o'clock on Christmas Day in the afternoon, and somebody had pushed the big biffer bin, the big refuse, up against the store and set fire to it. Clearly done on purpose, knowing that I'd get called out on Christmas Day. And it was all sort of payback for what had gone on, and it was all laughed off at the time. And if you were lucky, you got moved to another store, and some poor unsuspecting so-and-so after you could follow in, and you got sent to one in a supposedly nicer neighborhood, which just meant they nicked more, but just did it in better clothes. But yeah, it was a interesting time. But I think the transition from and the senior, your ops, even your buyers, everybody turned a blind eye. In those days, Pretty Polly that sold tights and the beer companies would come out and they would place orders directly with the store managers.
Yeah.
And it was, if you put John Smith's at the front of your store for Christmas, there's a Sony Walkman in it for you.
Yeah.
So we took the Sony Walkman as we placed an order, put John Smith's at the front of the store, never sold John Smith's in that particular store, and it all went out of date. But we weren't judged on that because we got a credit note from the buyer, from the brewery company. So there was no downside. The pain went elsewhere. So, and again, everybody thought they were doing a great job. And to your point, Ian, is everything from clothes underneath the uniform through to a packet of biscuits at every single tea break every single day. That was just the norm. So there was a big cultural shift, and it took a long time to change those behaviors just to address internal. And from an external perspective, all we'd got was a few, I'm sorry for the ex-police listening, but generally we'd go and hire retired police officers, think that they would make great store detectives and have them wandering around, and they'd catch nobody. And yet now there are certain bits of technology which the vast majority of retailers would consider absolutely normal and required, but still those behaviors internally and externally are there. They're just doing different things now. So the same fundamental challenges are there, and every time you roll out a new piece of technology, it closes one gap, but human nature, being as creative as it is, then looks for the next gap in the fence and see what can be achieved through that, shall we say.
I think what you're talking about there now, Gary, I don't know, in terms of insider theft, is clearly still. I think we were talking about this, weren't we, Gary?
Well, one of the things I was just trying to find the figures. I was just flicking through here because I think it was something like I can't find the percentage I was looking for. But as a company, they allow for something like, I think it was like 40% for internal thefts.
Yep.
And they take that into consideration, which I think is crazy. And then externally, again, it's another high rate of which they expect to have stuff stolen. So as you said, you've got it working on the inside and you've got it working on the outside. The inside is quite, as you just rightly said, people work around things. You put things in place and you get the next thing stage and someone finds the way around that. So you're obviously trying that. But it's the external effects, which is becoming more sort of aggressive and more open and obvious from what it used to be, where, we had a thing the other day where one of my guys was in a shop and we got it on video. We saw people actually pickpocket out of another person. They didn't get the shop. They actually pickpocketed another person while the security guard was dealing with somebody else. But the thing about that is people are being so open and blazoned by it now, where they're just walking in and just, I take, and you're going to do anything. And the security officer, the store detectives, or the shop workers just stand there and have got to just stand there and watch. I mean, how do you feel on that?
Yeah, it's and you're right. It's so I think where you have to be aware of it, and I think it was Professor Joshua Banfield, who one of my favourite academics, is hopefully somewhere warm enjoying the sunshine now and not on the cut and thrust on a day to day. But to your point, Garrett, I remember hearing him present a piece of research where he said for every 4 employees that you've got, 1 in 4 will be a honest, true employee and will do everything by the book. 1 in 4 employees will be out to defraud you at every opportunity, and they will actively look to take advantage. Now, the scary bit is the other 2 of the 4 will consider themselves to be good, honest employees. However, if presented with the opportunity to make bad choices, pickpocketing or whatever it might be, they will also defraud you. So poor controls and a dubious culture can suddenly mean that 75% of your employees are looking to defraud you. Then when you have skills, shall we say, that people might have outside of work, pickpocketing, taking from other members of staff, opportunities for making claims, it's very easy to see. And you talk to a lot of big successful retailers that have bought failing or failed retailers. 9 times, it's maybe 75% of the time, those businesses are viable. They've just had poor management practices. So they are not unprofitable businesses. There was one particular one I was made aware of, and its leakage figure, its stop loss figure was 11%. For many years, 1% of turnover was considered the target. But I think when I went to work for Aldi, UK retailers were 1% when I was there. Aldi came along and went, no, 0.4% is what we're looking for. I don't know what they go for today. And so you've got these businesses that have failed, 11%, and it's just not an achievable number where you can operate. So, and again, it comes back to if you've got those poor processes, one member of staff cashing up, through to refunds, through to staff discount, sweethearting. So I'll come to you, Gary, on the till, and you'll scan, the bottle of Pepsi, and you'll miraculously not scan the bottle of champagne that's afterwards. I'll tap my credit card to pay. I'll, of course, given you my staff discount card, and away I've gone. And then you and I will meet up later before we go round to Ian's for his birthday, and we'll present Ian with a bottle of champagne that we've just bought him. Aren't we nice friends? Look, it's a really expensive bottle of champagne, Ian. Just don't ask for the receipt. So, and over the years, we've done many surveys and questionnaires, a lot of them anonymously. And I've come to the conclusion, if a retailer doesn't acknowledge that internal is the same as external, they're either not being honest or they don't really have a handle on the situation. But you've got retailers that have got different structures, partnerships opposed to commercial, charity. But the problem's the same regardless of the structure of the retail. So, and there's lots of technology now, and some of it's absolutely brilliant. Right down to technology that stops push out trolleys, to smoke going off with break-ins, to RFID to tell you whether something was sold in the first place, and all sorts of bits and pieces. CCTV that can look at Ian's face and see whether he looks stressed when he's making a refund, which would indicate that it's probably something that we need to investigate. But all of those bits still rely on that human element. And people say, oh, it was a computer glitch. We mentioned before we came on air, I got caught up with the big software glitch that particularly hit the transport, the CrowdStrike. Yeah, they're going, oh, it was a computer error. But it was a human being that pressed the button and didn't do the process properly. And this is the bit I think sometimes we forget. We'll install this technology and we'll get our shrink figure down. Well, you will if you use it properly. And it's the same in any walk of life through to, have the best car in Formula One, but if the driver doesn't apply it properly, you're not going to win. So that, for, lots of years in retail and 22, 23 in the retail risk space, over and over again comes down to it. It's the culture, it's the application, it's making the system usable, not getting in the way of selling. When I think back to whenever we saw a theft in the early days, you used to have to walk to the office, open a book and write it down. Well, when you were writing it in the book, the other aisle was being cleared out because the crime gangs knew that if they purposely nearly got caught, everybody would leave the shop floor to write up what they saw. Obvious, really, when you think about it. They cottoned onto that before we did, and so would go round all the stores, nearly getting caught looking suspicious, because that was the fastest way to get all the stuff off the shop floor.
We used to get it. We used to get it on in Tesco's and all the places that I worked. Certainly through to say from the certainly 2000s, as there is, you get that the false flag. So they go in, you'd follow them, and like, well, you're over in A, they're down in B, stealing something. You would get that process going on all the time, and it's just amazing how many things, listening to how many things haven't changed though, Paul. The tactics that work then are exactly the same because they are all basically working on human interaction, aren't they? And the lack of it. The other thing was, I bet you used to get your stuff, shoplifters used to turn up on a Monday or Tuesday. That was when we used to get most of ours. Yeah, that they would come in then because they would know that the staff at that time were all busy replenishing the weekend trade.
Yeah, they knew when the stock came in. And again, it's the classic, embed somebody. We had a situation we were involved in one of the main shopping streets in London, and this organised crime gang ran a whole series of people up and down all of the stores, and they had 2 CVs. And in one of the stores, I was the perfect model employee, working 15, 20 hours a week. And I did nothing wrong, regardless of the opportunity. And then in the other store, I took every opportunity. But retailers for many years were just happy to see a, dubious member of staff leave. So I would steal as much as possible. And just before I thought you might be able to figure me out, I'd leave. And you go, oh, fantastic, Paul's left, that problem's gone away. Then I'd apply for a job in the next retailer and ask for a reference from the other job where I was the best employee. And so I now get hired again. And so there was a crime gang that went up and down this main London street over and over again, vast amount. Nobody quite got to the bottom of the number, but they'd got people embedded. So much so that when one of the main mobile phone contractors companies changed the company that they used for the finance, word got out instantly that it had gone from X to Y, and the organised crime gangs knew how to get finance from this new incumbent, even though they shouldn't. And so they went up and down the street with a vast amount of Apple iPhones over a weekend, before on the Monday it got flagged up. Well, hang on a minute, why were sales up 800% this weekend just gone? The weekend that we've just changed from this finance company to that finance company. Somebody peers in, and again, inside information, tipping it off. And there's a million stories and case studies around about that. But again, it's people. Somebody changed the finance company because it made more of a profit to the bottom line, but didn't then follow the process through to understand the implications. And of course, the profit's only there if you make the sale and it all works properly. But Gary in finance didn't check in with Ian on the front line, and certainly didn't ask Paul, who runs the stores, See, if we'd all gone to Ian's party with that champagne, we
we'd have
might
been
have figured it
sound
out.
if we'd have bought it, or he'd have won it in a ticket that he never gets. Anyway, moving swiftly on, Gary, we've spoken about before about the importance of communication across all, in these kind of environments, haven't we?
Oh, totally. I mean, as you say, what we're saying is what Paul just said. If no one's going to talk about it, it just stays in that section, that little box. And so I say, only me and Ian know about it. Paul doesn't know about it, and we're okay. And Paul's got no idea. Yeah, it works out.
And it protects us, does it? Because we don't want to look silly, do we? Somebody's made a mistake, and it's okay, and that's when it comes back. Paul's gone. Thank God. We can sort this out. Yeah, we'll blame Paul. Yeah, and that's how we'll do it. So communication, leadership, and there's that's another thing that for another time about the difference between leaders and managers, because I have seen that because there is a time, I think, for managers in stores where you need a manager, somebody who can control what's going on, is very effective, etc., follow the process, obviously with the incumbent leadership behaviors that he's been trained in, etc., but sometimes you need a leader, Paul, and it would strike me, given your rise through the ranks, that you were always a leader. If you because they are different, aren't they?
I mean, I think that I always used to take it personally, if you like. So, I think, I always think one of the big indicators on where somebody sits within the business, if you go for a refund or you'll talk to somebody and the store manager, associate, whatever, will say, oh, they don't do it like this. And so they'll talk about their employer in the third person as if they're not really connected. Yet, I think somebody that is more vested will say, oh, actually, we do it like this, or this is how we'll solve this problem, or let me see what I can do to fix that problem. And I still maintain over all these years, that's one of the biggest indicators of what's going on. And the jet, arrived back from Melbourne, went into a well-known supermarket this weekend just gone, and I was having problems with the self-checkout machine. They'd already irritated me because I'd stood at the checkout and was told there wasn't anybody available to help me at the checkout, so I had to go through the self-service. And then as I was trying to go through the self-service, apparently I was moving things in the wrong order and it kept erroring. So I said, I think the old machine, I might have said crap, a sort of low-level curse, at which point the member of staff went, well, I don't control that. That's the machine that they put in there, and you're not following the process that they tell you to follow. Okay, now I'm even more irritated because I've got a problem, opposed to saying, oh, I'm really sorry that you're not getting on with our machines. Let me run a few items through for you to show you how they work the best and the quickest. But it was an instant they bat it off, and this particular member of staff didn't know that I jet lagged and grumpy or whatever it might be, but it went from an opportunity to showcase that particular retailer that I don't use that often. Again, they don't know that. That retailer could have been showcased in a great light with ownership. And this person was a person in a customer forward-facing role that's going to interact with hundreds of customers in this busy store, and yet clearly was irritated by my inability to use their machine. And it was a basket into a bag, but apparently I was touching it twice and not
the old basket.
Oh.
basket to bag failure.
And it's
Gary,
I was in need. I was trying to buy 6 tubes of Nespresso coffee capsules to charge myself up for the day, and we're told they were too light when you put them in the bag. Well, okay.
I tell you what we were looking at. We were looking at as well as because as I say, we thought it was important that we actually bothered, because we don't normally. I'll be honest, we don't bother researching people normally and the industry, but because it's retail tech, we were looking at it, and it's quite interesting. We were discussing it again just before we came on air about Adrian Beck from Leicester, great professor, by the way, on that University of Leicester. Yeah, and I think his findings on what SEO self-checkout guardians, I think they're called, aren't they? How they see themselves, or how they feel they are trained, treated, and looked after during that process. Well, I mean, Gary, what was it you said about it being something to do with not enough time spent on training and
No, yeah. What we were talking about is, again, we go back to time. We've taken people away from the jobs, haven't we? So whereas, if we go back to the old days when we were younger men, not that far away, you get your checkout, isn't it? Everyone was on the checkout. You had the person standing over. You had the person running behind, all the rest of it. And now you've got this case where you self-checkout. You've got your guardian over there, and they can either have 2 roles in it. They could be really into it. It's like you're 1 in 4 people, or to be the person like you met. Oh, well, you're getting it wrong. And what we're finding, also, I was looking at research, I was just trying to bring it back up while we're talking, is that there was, I think, 72% are not being trained correctly. And they're missing out on that. And when you start putting that into the retail loss idea, if someone doesn't give a damn, and like you, if that's not weighing a lot and you're putting it through, how many things are slipping through on that side as well? That's a lot of retail which is going missing. Not only that, while that's going on, you've got the man behind the corner just going, well, that's going on.
And most of the time when there's an error, they're sort of, they just come over and sort of tap it through anyway, just rolling their eyes. I mean, Adrian's done some great work over the years. I'm not sure we need an esteemed professor to tell us that self-checkouts don't work and they lose money, do we? That was probably the easiest gig he's ever had to come to that conclusion. But it is that point. I mean, so there was a Carrefour in Belgium. I don't know how far it got with them, but they made a change, because this was 10 years ago. As people were rolling them out, they rolled them out and already come to the conclusion that they're a liability. And so they removed the payment aspect from the self-checkout. So you did the self-checkout and then you went to a member of staff to pay. And although that member of staff wasn't looking at your self-checkout, the figures that they saw, so your opportunist, because they had to go to a person, that meant that they'd have to look your eye in the eye, knowing that they defrauded, stolen, and make the payment. And so the accuracy, they took 70 or 80% of their losses away from self-checkout. It was, the people that had turned up to steal from them still stole. And arguably they would anyway. So they're the people that we're using the technology for. This comes back to that 50% of the workforce, the population, that if allowed to make a bad choice, will make a bad choice. And I think self-checkout gives people permission to make bad choices. And if I've got to use a self-checkout and then I've got to go and pay Ian, well, I know it's Ian's birthday. I see Ian every week. I'm going to feel like I'm ripping Ian off on his birthday as well. And so I'm more likely to have scanned all of the products. And Carrefour in Belgium found this a decade ago. And I was always amazed that that model didn't get adopted further and wider. But again, you assume the disconnect. Gary's there with his time and motion study, looking at what he can save from an operator perspective, missing the brand interaction, missing customer frustration, missing, the Mrs. Miggins that actually might miss-scan the meat every now and again because she wants a bigger joint this week, or he wants a bigger joint this week. So it's an interesting dynamic, if you like, and I really like that update that they did.
I think I think the bit that I would come on there that for me is and it's the brand. You miss the opportunity to represent the company, to say, here am I, this is Ian, great to meet you. This might be the only interaction that you have with another human being in our very busy world all day long. And yeah, I really, really am not bothered how many pies you want to bake for Blackadder, this week, Mrs. Miggins. The bottom line is you're here and I see you. And the brand, what you're essentially saying is the brand sees you. I think there's a lot of merit in that. So if you're going to have a bit of bean counting and say we can reduce X and we don't need X or Y, there's a place for that, but it needs to be put in the customer focus needs to remain. Otherwise, the kind of interactions that you've just described as having, I've had. Gary, have you had them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give you a prime example here, Ian, which I've taken out of your book, is the Marks and Spencer situation, isn't it? Where the people used to fold the clothes back up.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
you
training, brilliant.
And you go back there, and you'd have that interaction, isn't it? You pull it all apart, and next thing you know, someone from Marks and Spencer's one said, "Let's put it all back and nicely folded." And it makes you feel bad about you've unfolded the damn thing for a start, but you've got interaction, and then you've got that. Do you need help? And that whole brand thing it breaks down communication. Well, sorry, it brings in the communication, I should say, and also it helps the brand sell more because you've got that interaction with the customer, and they tend to buy stuff. And also, it's taken away, hopefully, that incentive to steal. Because when you've got there, you're walking through. When we go back to what's it called? You talk about the
active bystander.
Yeah, active bystander. But I'm going back to the store detectives.
Sorry, yeah.
But most of the time, you saw those guys standing out like a sore thumb. As you say, they were try a copper's and there you are. I mean, I remember being a kid like that. Oh, fuck me, that's the store detective. You can't. I'm sorry, I just swore as well again. Sorry, Ian.
This is why.
But you go, oh, put it back, wouldn't you? Suddenly, bits and pieces. It's that seems to be gone. But if I just want to throw this back a little bit, because we're talking about the self checkouts, bits and pieces. If we go back to the old days, I wonder what the comparison was going for customer stealing or people stealing from shops compared to what they are doing now. Just take away from the guys, well, the people just walking in and doing what they want. But how many people actually were, I'd like to know what the percentage was when back in the 70s and 80s where we had all the till was there, you had to fill up your trolley, you come back, how many, what that percentage actually was compared to now when we've got these self-checkout things. I'd love to know that. Do you know that, Paul? Or you got any inkling?
No, I mean, everybody's got an inkling and but it's a bigger picture that it's there's key milestones along the way in society where, points have changed, and it's well documented that society managed to unhinge itself, another turn of the screw, during and post COVID. In the UK at the minute, many retailers will say that their biggest losses is, first person fraud. So people that they know, who have downloaded playbooks from Facebook and TikTok marketplaces, social media, that tell them how to defraud retailers. And, we're being told, well, you're entitled to it. They can afford it. So it's difficult to navigate because in the 70s, it wasn't being looked at. The business was either profitable or it wasn't. And there was the expectation that people conducted themselves in a certain way. And there was lots of staff on the shop floor. Then, through the 80s, more consumerism. And that was the start of a raft of luxury products and electronics that we aspire to, that we never had before. So all of a sudden, temptation starts to come in. And then by the 90s, it sort of starts to separate a little bit more. And so there isn't a direct comparison. And then it was really only about sort of the late 90s that we started to look at shrink figures a little bit more and to understand them. And then first it was 1.5, then it was 1.2, then it was 1%. I remember shock horror, might have been Sainsbury's or whatever, went, no, we're going to aim for 0.8. There was the sharp intake of breath about that. But there were process issues as well as, they're all unknown losses. We didn't know where any of this went. It just sort of went. And then it sort of gradually got looked at more and more. But at the moment, retailers are under pressure on all fronts like never before. Cost of living crisis, whole host of opinions about whether it is or whether that's just a convenient hook to put behavior onto. Organized crime stealing from one country to ship to another, as we saw with baby milk coming out of Australia and Southeast Asia into the Chinese market, where Chinese consumers had lost faith in baby milk produced locally due to a raft of infant deaths. So it was an extreme situation. And so you've just got more and more scenarios coming to play. But if I go into a large Tesco, a John Lewis, wherever it might be, I'm going to see a whole collection of products that as an average consumer I can't afford. Yet social media is more and more telling me that I need them in order to be a successful, beautiful person. Then we've got this narrative that, well, you're entitled to it, which is something that's come about post-COVID. Then there becomes this, well, it's all about you. If you watch, let's name TikTok, it operates differently in the box. That's all about what's in it for you. What can you do? Pranking other people, how to get your Lamborghini. And so we're being bombarded by all these messages telling us that it's okay to defraud. You're entitled to it. You put all that together, more sophisticated solutions and more sophisticated ways to get rid of the product than just going down the pub and selling it to a few blokes with a transit van. So more and more pressure is being put on us. And so, it's understandable and inevitable that retailers have to go for data mining, trolleys that can't be pushed out, smoke, CCTV, artificial intelligence to monitor the cameras, facial recognition to look for stress, smart water, or even in South Africa, they put explosives now in the cash boxes because even 1% of cash surviving is considered a good haul. So it is, it's slightly terrifying, if you like, in terms of where it's all going. And those of us on the good side have to continue to look at the technology, share information at the same speed that the bad guys and girls are doing, and just try and keep up and keep the retailers, keep the brands, keep everybody in business.
Right, Paul, I'm going to think, because I'm well aware of the time, and I do want to obviously, you've been brilliant. So I just wanted, I was sort of pitching to Gary a dystopian store of the future. One that you could go into and you would essentially walk back in time and everything was open and you could buy it. Pick it up, sniff it, scratch it, whatever it is that you do. That's not something I'm recommending to anybody out there. But the bottom line is essentially we would use AI, machine learning. We would use our CCTV. We would use our facial recognition, and what would essentially happen is you would go in to a football, because my view is the best place to stop something is at the front door before you come in. Not once you're in, it's hard to get them out or saying that, because that's been certainly my experience. So you'd have a football type style turnstiles, or like what was it I was saying, like the TfL for London. So you walk in, you dog your pod your little Oyster card or Tesco card down on there. It now knows who you are. You walk round, fill up your trolley. You don't need anything because it's all there. Don't need as many you don't need as many staff. You'll walk in, do your stuff, and then you go out. You can't push it out because you've got one of these trolleys that you can't push out, etc. And basically, it's job solved. But Gary's not keen on that. And I was just wondering, is there a store out there that already does this?
No. The scan and go, everything in, tap your card, walk out. I'll let you into a secret. Some of the early ones, with all the cameras watching people pick them up, that was being relayed in real time to an office full of hundreds of people that were keying in each basket. That's how the very first trial started.
Really?
One of the brands that tried it, the technology didn't work. And so the infrastructure and the pipe that had to go in was off the charts. Do you know what? It might come back. And people say, but I think it's a way off, actually. I think the technology has got a little way to go before, you know, we're all in a Tom Cruise Minority Report situation where it recognizes you on the way in, you pick it up and walk out, because the incentive to walk in with somebody else's iris, somebody else's fingerprint, and particularly your credit card in, is so appealing that, you know, crime gangs will just latch onto it. So I'd like to think that physical retail is at the cusp of fighting back against online, and the smart retailers will be doing that with people, customer service, interaction, and not getting caught up on everybody wanting everything to be the cheapest. Sometimes there's a time and a place for a premium offering, and there's also a time and a place for fast and quick, and it's okay for those to be in different places.
I see. Okay, there you are. Okay, Gary wins one.
Yeah,
let's see. 2 years that's taken full, but he's won one. So but that's
and on your birthday as well, Ian. That's disappointing.
Broken my heart now. But on a serious note, we're going to sign off now. I think not because because I could talk for ages, but Gary, do the sign out, the socials, please. Earn your crust.
I'll certainly do that. Just before I do that, I just want to do a quick overview for this, because I think it's important that people understand that retail theft is not just guys and people running in the grabbing stuff. It's behind the scenes. It's out on the internet. It's a huge subject, which you could really need. I think it's one of the things we need to really delve into and take one section at a time, because it's been very interesting. Because what we see on the news, we forget about the internal stuff, which is just as bad. On that note, if you like our product, if you like what we do here, and you like how we produce stuff, I've got my brain's gone today now, Ian. Let's talk about retail. Please like and subscribe. Press the button somewhere down there. If you want to know more about Paul, I'm sure Ian will put some descriptions in the links below. And also in the link below, you'll find our link to our website. And if you go on our website, we are giving away our guest safety officer patches coming up in the next following week. I hand over to you, Ian.
Very much, guest safety officer patches. But right, okay, Paul, some final thoughts, please.
I think the final thoughts come back to what I alluded to just then. Is I've been in retail itself for a long time, and as challenging as it is out there, I'm probably more optimistic about physical retail. Retail is the world's biggest employer. It is the most agile, innovative, exciting industry to see. And when you've got retailers turning a profit in some of the most, war-torn, challenging, disruptive markets in the world, it just shows what is possible and what great people we've got working in retail. So getting those physical stores, have a look around, continue to feed back. Let's push the technology to make the physical experience as good as possible, because I don't know about you guys, but I like to leave the house every now and again and see things in the real world. So long may that continue.
Is it? Yeah. Paul, thank you so much. I suppose just for me, just to say, it's been great hearing you talk about the importance of communication. If people don't get it, they still don't get it. It's not just in retail, it's every single aspect of the things that I'm involved in. It's invariably the point of failure is poor communication. The other things that invariably come up, and Gary and I talk about, is, you know, the compliance over competence, where, you know, we're trying to, we're just more interested in complying and ticking a box than we are in actually remembering the essential outcome of the service that we're trying to offer. Yeah, which is, we are dealing with people when we talk about retail. That is it. You know, the essential outcome is them, you know, their jaw, their shopping basket, and they won't come back. They will not be with us if they don't feel as though they're appreciated. Every single person where I live and work, we all want shops. We miss our high streets, but they've got to tell a story, and they've got to be engaging, and they've got to have the content that draws us in. It's great doing a broadcast with my man Gary here, but nobody's going to be going out and purchasing the video anytime soon. That's not meant to be detrimental. It's meant to say that we are people and we need to be together. And as Paul said, you meet people outside your living room, you know, your little podcast office. It's in the street, it's in the shops, and it's a truly amazing career. All right, and on that note, people, peace out.
Thank you.